I'm Panos Kotzathanasis, and this is Asian Movie Pulse Interviews. Today we are here with Liam LoPinto, whose film The Old Young Crows recently received top awards at the Palm Springs International ShortFest, continuing a rather successful festival run. So, Liam, did you expect this success, screening all over the world, winning awards?
Absolutely not. Absolutely, absolutely not. I did not think this was. I mean, I knew at a certain point that when I showed the footage of to my mom of the hand going into the sketchbook, that I knew that she had approved of what I was doing. But I didn't know I was actually gonna have any kind of reception like this. In fact, when I had gone to Palm Springs, I was only there for like a couple days just to say hi. I was selected for the opening night screening, and I didn't even know what that meant because this was my first time like actively screening and going to festivals. Um, and then I left a couple days because I had to go to Tokyo to screen at Short Shorts. And I was going back to Japan so I could show the film to everybody, who had helped make it all those years ago. And yeah, it was literally I was in a business hotel nearby in Shibuya, and I like was like half naked, half asleep on the bed, and my phone was like on my stomach because I was texting my mom, and like all of a sudden I just like woke, just got like buzzed like crazy on my chest. And then my friend Max, who was at the festival for me, like, sent me the award and everything and sent me the Hollywood Reporter article. And I was like, oh my God, and then my phone just buzzed like crazy. And I was like, oh God, I gotta go to Matsuya. Just I was like, I need a beef bowl. and then just kind of took off from there, at a certain point, and it really changed the trajectory of this entire year, which was eventually just being focused on like, okay, I gotta make the next film, and then it was like, oh, okay, now I'm campaigning for this and everything.
But did you have time to think about it? Or why was the film so successful? What do you feel is the element that appealed to the audience and critics the most?
Um, I think I think there's a couple of things. I think well, obviously the mixed media element has been something people point out a lot. I've been really happy that people have seen it as like organic, and as it flows naturally with each other. Because like that's the whole point, and like a lot of what I want to do in terms of like imbuing animation live action is to kind of make it feel as like invisible as possible, or at the certain point of like it couldn't be told any other way but that way. And I think people like have fallen in love with Now, who plays Merdad in the film. His eyes are so expressive. My grandpa's voice, is very, powerful and elegant. And I feel like the Gugush song that plays throughout the film is also very like inspiring and powerful, and it kind of creates a theme behind the movie. And then I think also like the sketchbook as well has kind of as well become like its own character, that people have kind of, been like invested in and they want to
Wow.
see.
So it actually exists, this sketch. Okay.
Yeah, yes, it does. Yes, it took me about 3 months just solely doing that in order to facilitate that for the film.
And tell me a bit about the story. How did you stumble upon the particular story of the short?
Yeah, I mean, well, I was in Japan. I was studying abroad at Waseda University. And I was actually spending a lot of time drawing in I was living in actually West Tokyo at the time, at a shared house, and there was like there's parks and graveyards if you bike and you go to places. And I spent a lot of time because I was working on uh, an application for CalArts for their character animation program. And so I was spending a lot of time sketching, and went to a graveyard, And because it's peaceful, it's like very interesting. Everything there is kind of interesting to draw and like focus on drawing other stuff. And I was just listening to music, and then I saw this big crow land on the grave opposite me, and I was like, oh, it was interesting. I got kind of inspired. I was like, it's kind of a cool image of a grave and a crow landing on it. And so it was in the back of my mind. And that year, Abbas Kiarostami, the great Iranian filmmaker, he passed away. Um, and there were a lot of retrospectives in Iran at the time about Iranian filmmakers. And it was at that time, that I was introduced to Shoreh Golparian, who was his assistant and translator for making like Someone in Love. And she introduced me to some of the retrospectives. I got to see a lot of great Iranian films about like youth, like Where's the Friend's House and Willow and Wind, in which Kiarostami wrote, and also other films like Amir Naderi's The Runner, and Jafar Panahi's The Mirror. And it was stuff like that where I was like, I just kind of want to make a film about Iranian boy in Japan. And I kind of modeled the film in a way where I had a conversation with a bunch of Japanese directors who were like at the retrospective and everything. And they loved Iranian films. They're like, oh, we're so inspired by Iranian films. Like, we don't have like these kind of films in Japan. And, when they were made, they were really inspirational. And then like, it made me proud of my own heritage. And it made me go like, oh, this is for the first time, it like felt really cool to be where I was from. And I just remember like calling up my mom and just being like, oh my gosh, yeah, like want to learn how to cook, I want to learn how to, I was very much in the mindset of I wanted to reclaim my culture. And, at that point I was like, okay, well, I want to make a film like basically about that, about a kid in Japan, like learning to reclaim his own culture after being displaced. And that's kind of the whole incubus for where the film came from.
But did it kind of the story resonate with you, the foreigner in Japan concept?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of it is based off of me, and it's based off of, my experience. I mean, like even the sketchbook, like a lot of the, pop culture references and everything like that. Like, like just for example, like Tekken,
Oh, okay.
like that's just obviously like, for me, it was just from me growing up and, stuff that I liked, and it was imbued obviously. And my grandfather plays the older version of the character years later. So there's obviously like some parallels that go on there. And the thing is though, people have like, people have been thinking that it's like my grandfather's story or it's like a documentary or something like that. And but it's completely made up. Like my grandfather was like convinced that like the people were actually there and existed, you know? And the cat is moving the webcam.
Oh, okay.
And Herman's like, stop. I'm at my friend's house and they have cats here. Um, and he goes like when I went back to Japan, he was like, say hi to Chio and
Okay.
Chiharu. And I was like, Grandpa, I was like, what was your there's no Chio, there's no Chiharu. Like we made this up. And he's like, no, 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 go say hi. So I think like that realistic first person narration, resonated with me and resonated with a lot of people. This idea of looking back at an experience of your life and being able to see it in a new way or recontextualize it or going back for further inspiration, for a memory essentially.
And to get briefly a bit away from the movie, how was the experience of moving from the West to Japan? And also, how was Waseda University in general? Would you describe it? We have a show here, cat show here, right?
Put away your butt, man. I honestly, I think it was wonderful. In retrospect, I got to meet obviously I met Karen, who introduced me to you.
Mm-hmm.
And she was my teacher at from my cinema, my Japanese director course at Waseda University, and she introduced me to Shorei too. So it was a lot of like, it was those kind of introductions, that really spearheaded this whole process. And like living there in Japan at the first time, like, do you just want attention? Uh, uh, it it gave me a lot of freedom to be able to explore, to be able to it's like Hermes, I can't not now, like later, buddy. Um, it gave me a lot of room to explore, it gave me a lot of ways and inspiration to be able to draw and to, be able to get inspired by nature. And also it gave me an opportunity to like go to places where like my favorite movies were filmed. And I just spent a lot of time, going to like one of my favorite movies is God damn, dude. Yeah, is the Samurai trilogy by Hiroshi Inagaki. And it was I went a lot of time to like um to the Miyamoto birthplace, essentially. And I went to a lot of different historical places that I was inspired. And so going to Japan was like, it was like I felt really inspired, and I felt also very welcomed by the people there, especially the elderly people. I think maybe that's why a lot of the film, is centered around that concept of meeting you know, uh, an older woman, is because, when I was traveling around before I even went to Waseda, I had known people there. I had known a friend who had ran a hostel in Kyoto. And so I had stayed there for a few times before. And when I was backpacking around, the old people, the elderly in Japan had been like the nicest, essentially. And they were like going out of their way constantly to, make me comfortable. Like a lot of time I spent sketching around Japan, like when it was like really cold, like an elderly person would come over and they would like make me tea, and like, dude, bro, you it just jumped over the laptop. Um, and like you're like, oh, you're very like, oh, tell them like, oh, Nichan, you're very cold, you must here, yeah. And then so I would be drinking green tea that they would just give me. Like I had one time where I was in Hakodate, and like I was sketching just the fish market, and like this lady came over and she put a heater next to me and a blanket, and she just
Ooh.
started serving me hot tea. And then when I even went to the train station later, a man bought me like hot corn soup, and he like gave it to me, and he's like, like you're shivering, like you need this. And I'm pretty sure that was a lot of the inspiration for, me wanting to do like films here and stay here, was because of the kindness that I was shown that felt so unique to Japan and Japanese culture, beyond the inspiration of like nature and food, and things like that I talk about like in the film, like indirectly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I think most people who've gone to Japan and away with you, dear. uh, like will resonate with is how fresh the perspective is there, and like how like like any foreigner who goes to Japan will first kind of feel daunted. I mean, it's a homogeneous culture, there's a language shock, obviously, but there's so much about it that is like the surface level of it is not enough. You have to go and you start talking to people individually, and like that's where the true inspiration for like this film and a lot of other ideas, I have, stemmed from there. And it made the sketchbook, I think, that I made for my application to Cal Arts, I think it made it that much more impactful.
Mm-hmm. But since you mentioned the sketchbook, are you thinking of maybe publishing it? It looks really interesting. I would buy that, I mean.
You know, it's funny. So, like, this thing, obviously, I sunk so much, time into it. It's a full actual, thing. And I think I'm going to hold on to it for one day because I would like to do a feature version of the film. I have this
Mm,
whole plan in mind. Instead of Tokyo, I would set it in Kyoto because it's like more of a walkable city, more of a bikeable city. I actually know the city pretty well. I've stayed there for a while. And like beyond the spiritual and historical nature of the city, like children are like walk and like freely roam it. It's not like Tokyo. It doesn't have that same boisterous energy. And like what I've always wanted to do with the feature version is like make two sketchbooks essentially, and one of the past boy Chiharu and one of Merdod as like sketchbook of like life from Merdod, sketchbook of death from Chiharu, and then like design the whole world of like Kyoto as essentially being this place that has like a Persian underbelly that nobody's ever explored, and the Japanese myths and the Persian myths kind of intertwine, and shooting it specifically on location so that eventually we could create like little Easter eggs, like, oh, go to this spot in Kyoto where it was like, filmed, it's things like that that I love, like specific locations in a city, specific places that you can go to and see and visualize and be part of the film, because that was part of my experience, was like going to filming locations that I remember from my favorite Japanese films.
Okay. And tell me a bit, the way the old lady and the kid connect in the graveyard, would you say it's their common loss, kind of one fills the gap of each other? Would you say that's the connection?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like she was waiting for him, in a way, obviously she's a spirit. And I feel like, in a way, Merdod was also waiting for her, without him knowing about it. Like clearly, I mean, he's a boy, right? He's like a little boy listening to music and eating lunch like in a graveyard, like near his school. He's clearly like not doing well. Like how many kids do you know like are actively doing that, right? You're like nobody's spending time in a graveyard. What are you looking at? Like, yeah, he's got to be like, like he's got to be, you know, he's got to still be dealing with trauma and processing grief, So he's clearly has this fascination with death, right? Consciously and subconsciously because of his mother, and obviously we don't, I don't say everything about, the fact that he is a refugee, that he is a displaced, person living in Japan. But like that aspect of him wanting to, or feels comfortable in this graveyard, I think kind of pulls in, Chio, and into his life to the point where like it's almost like of a metaphor of like her and her son's story as a motivus and like an incubator to just like empower him going forward to feel more comfortable within his own culture, to feel more comfortable in Japan, and also to create some kind of resonance with his own mother's passing. So obviously there's a lot of parallels between Chio and his mom and Chiharu and himself. And I think he feels like as well that Chiharu's story, which we leave kind of a mystery, we leave in kind of this illusion of his relationship with crows and becoming a crow. We also kind of see it as like a warning sign, for Merdad, to kind of go beyond that and not just simply like, stay in a graveyard the entire time and sketch, to leave that and to not be um, so alone, and that like, his mom and all these spirits are going to go with him, and that if he comes back though, he'll always find like his roots. And so, that's kind of the central core of the story.
Okay, okay. And tell me a bit about the art form. How did you achieve this combination of live action and anime? I'm particularly interested in there. How did you edit it, the two parts together?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I went to school for character animation at CalArts, and so this film took about 6 years to finish. I finished it up last year. It started at the end of 2016. We shot the film in 2 weekends, about four people a day, three different cinematographers, myself included. And $1,500 in total, I think the entire budget there, including food. And it was very shoestring. We cast the boy based off of like a net text that Shore's ex-husband had sent out for any Iranian expats, in Japan. And, we got a text back from a man named Hamid who had texted like a picture of his son, and he was just like up against a wall. And they're like, "Hey, will my son be okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, he's perfect." And I asked him based off a photo. We've never met him before, and there was no audition. Chio was just Shore's best friend in Japan, Yamashita-san. And we used her house for, filming Chio's house. And the graveyard is her graveyard nearby her house. And Yamashita-san's friend plays the obosan, the priest in the film, her friend from theater school. So that was it. Those three people plus my grandfather, and that's the entire, cast of the film, right? We shot that, and our footage was corrupted for a lot of different shots, lighting continuity errors because we had like three different cinematographers. Most of the audio was corrupted because we just had I was 21. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to like actually, you know, that was like the first time I think that I was like actually, working on my own set of a film and trying to make it. And I just didn't do a good job of getting the sound. The only sound that we got were the wild takes, just individually recording some of the voices. And so when I went back to the States and I started trying to edit it, I was so discouraged, by it. I was like, I don't have shit. Ah, there's nothing here. How am I going to edit this? And I was also going through like a big health crisis at the time, and I kind of put it down, and then each year I'd pick it up and I tried to work, a month at a time, trying to figure out how can I do this? How can I make something of the footage? And it wasn't until like a year after I graduated CalArts, I was going through a big period of grief and a mental health crisis. And I just picked up, the sketchbook that I had from years ago, and I picked up the footage, put it in Premiere, and as like an act of self-therapy, I just got to work on it. And luckily, my grandfather was coming back from Iran at the same time. I got the rights to the Gugush song, and I basically put the footage out on Premiere. I timed everything in the sketchbook. Obviously, I started doodling certain things, and I would just put post-it notes on a place where I knew I wanted animation to exist.
Mhm.
And I had mapped out essentially what I wanted, like for example, if I look at like let's say this page, the page that looks like an illustration from a manga in a
Mhm.
film, I knew that I wanted to cut back and forth between the footage here and his biking here. And so then I knew that I would like want like maybe a hand to move across the page as just a way of an interesting cut, to the next shot. And it was a lot of planning for things like that. Like, how can I make it tactile? How can I make it feel organic between the sketchbook and, the film footage? And obviously, I didn't have like a lot of great footage. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to draw the grave because I don't have a shot of a crow landing on a grave. So I'm going to have to draw a grave in the sketchbook and have the crow land on it. And it was a lot of reverse engineering as a result. So the whole film was essentially, me looking back at my experience making the film and also translating that into the new narrative of the film, which is old Mehrdad looking back on his life. And so those two things kind of paralleled each other.
Mhm. But did you edit yourself or?
Yes, yes.
Uh,
So I did the majority of the animation, editing, sound design I did with Ben Huff. And I did, yeah, so written, directed, produced, and all by me as well. So yeah, it was like tumultuous, in the end, especially because the animation that I was doing a lot of hand-drawn animation on pencil and paper. And it was getting really taxing on me by the end. And I have like 6 blisters on my hand just from doing like a lot of the sketching in the end, especially because you fill the screen with like black char pencil drawings, it takes a lot of work to do about like 50 of those just to get it looking right. And I basically was like to the point where I was working on the sound, I was editing it, I was like doing the compositing and the coloring, like, and I was like, I just reached out to my CalArts friends. I was like, I need help. Please help me finish this. And so I cast people in specific roles, like Suman did the hand going in, and Isa, my friend, did some of the sketchbook, like the feet going into the graveyard and things like that. And it was those moments that really helped me, finish the film and punctuated a lot of the elements in the film that I needed. And so, it was because I knew that there was an inherent discipline in the film that like everything has to come from the sketchbook, like, everything has to kind of stem from this. And so when I had that discipline, I knew that I could kind of make it feel organic from there.
And about the music, tell me a bit about that.
Well, yeah, that's another good question. Is basically I had listened to the song Hijrat by Gugush, and I was just very inspired by the melody of the film. It's like a classic Persian pop song, very popular back in the day. And Gugush is just like an idol. Everybody in Iran knows her. She's very, very well known. And I had gotten the rights to the song, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to use this, but I feel like this song works with like the flipping of the sketchbook pages. Like I felt like that first like like I felt like that worked as like like a flipping of the sketchbook pages open. So I was very inspired by that. And to be honest, I didn't really know that much about Persian pop songs ever since I was a kid, and like my grandma and my mom played them for me. But I had watched the film Hit the Road by Pana Panahi, and his film was like filled with these wonderful, pop songs. And I was like, I wonder if I could find a cool pop song, And so I just started listening around for Gugush's film. I was like, oh, this is great. I wonder what I'm going to do with this, And then that became the basis for the entire film. And I was like, I want to do a remix that he hears in his headphones, something that feels unique and subjective to him. And then I want to also do Chio's theme, but it's a more piano, violin thematic version of it as well. And then I wanted to completely contrast it with a Kwaidan-esque ghost story, feel. So we had Nobuko, it was a biwa and vocal player, and she did her own. We wrote the lyrics, and we did our own rendition of like a Kwaidan-esque ghost theme in order for that scene where he discovers, that Chio's not there.
Okay. And well, I guess last question. Tell me future projects. What are you working on next?
Yeah, so I got a few things in mind. I have a short film that I'm working on about a Syrian refugee girl in therapy, and she navigates her PTSD and her mental illness through fruit, and the fruit is animated in stop motion. So like the rinds peel, break apart, pomegranate seeds moving. It's all supposed to reflect her subconscious and her episode of psychosis. And I'm very excited about doing it because it's a very personal story related to my own family and related to, I work with, Syrian refugees, and my organization, Karam Foundation, that's founded by Lina Sergi Attar, and they empower Syrian refugee youth, and a lot of the experience is based off of me talking with students there and everything. Another film project I'm working on, obviously, is eventually turning this into, a full feature. I plan to one day spend like 3 months in Kyoto and just make the 2 sketchbooks and write the screenplay at the same time, and kind of set the foundation there for, what I would eventually call like our production and filming of that, because I have a very ambitious idea of that. And yeah, there are a few other projects down the road, that like one about my parents meeting in America, and another about my friend, and it's a documentary. He's the head of paleontology at the Natural History Museum, and so I have a film about that I'm slowly but surely working on that I'm very excited for. And I love, imbuing animation into my projects, not because of any kind of gimmicky nature, but because I like trying to make it invisible. And I like the fact that I get to work on some animation in a film, because mostly people won't let you, or it's too expensive, and it's nice to be able to have something practical to work on. And I like handmade, hand-feely, things.
So you are planning to continue with this combination of live action and animation, I guess.
Yeah, purely out of the reason I just want to keep animating, and I feel like if I just dropped live action, or I did one thing or the other, I feel like I would lose some of my like, acumen for that stuff, and drawing and constantly like making things, practically making things, and also filming and working on my live action work, talking with actors. Like I like both of those aspects, so I'd like to continue to do something like that in one capacity or another.
Well, great. I guess that's it. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you, Panos. This was lovely. Yeah.